Why did Russia suddenly stop deploying North Korean Coxswain artillery on the Western Front? The answer lies in a single dawn strike that turned a safe reinforcement into a graveyard. 3 HIMARS rockets, costing less than $150,000 in total, wiped out assets 300 times more valuable. But more damaging than the destruction was the message it sent to Moscow and Pyongyang. Loyalty doesn't guarantee survival. So what exactly happened inside that Kursk forest? And why was it over in just 91 seconds? Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. What happens when weapons once rolled through the capital of North Korea, paraded before cheering crowds, start gathering dust in the woods of Western Russia? The massive Coxswain 170mm guns had been shown off as trophies of an alliance, machines that symbolized a partnership stretching far beyond trade or ideology. Now they stood west of Kursk, their barrels pointing at the sky as if waiting for a battle that never quite reached them. The problem was not their size or their strength, it was what came next when protection turned into exposure. The agreement itself was simple. Moscow wanted firepower it could call its own, and Pyongyang wanted proof that its weapons mattered on a world stage. The Coxswains answered both calls. When Russian broadcasts showed these guns being unloaded from transport units, commentators painted them as saviors of crumbling defensive lines. Moscow promised that Ukrainian attacks would shatter against the strength of these foreign reinforcements. They sold it as more than artillery. They made it a symbol of loyalty, of 2 regimes bound together against pressure from the West. Deploying them west of Kursk was meant to be more than a tactical move. Commanders thought they were making a statement that heavy artillery could sit just beyond the zone of regular combat and still cast a shadow over advancing enemy positions. The thick forests around the site seemed ideal, with pine and birch trees forming a living wall that concealed movement from prying eyes. To those who arranged the deployment, secrecy came cheap. They believed the canopy offered protection that satellite images and drones had no chance of piercing. Each artillery gun required its own crew, its ammunition, and vehicles to keep supply lines functioning. Around 60 North Korean personnel tended these machines daily, rotating duties as crews checked barrels, fueled trucks, or loaded explosives. They lived in temporary shelters nearby, their radios tuned to Russian command channels. Ammunition trucks stood parked beside the tree line, their cargo stacked like columns of iron. To the outside observer, it looked like a fortress, invisible and unreachable, a kind of reserve kept in the rear to guarantee that no Ukrainian counteroffensive could break through untouched ground. This was the picture painted for the public. On Russian news, the sight of the Coxswains reassured audiences that allies still believed in their fight. For Pyongyang, images of its soldiers standing alongside Russian troops were beamed back home, where the message was crystal clear. North Korean firepower had traveled thousands of miles and was now part of a common struggle. These broadcasts suggested permanence, that this was no temporary arrangement but a reminder of strength. Yet, what was built on image was fragile. The assumption that the woods guaranteed security ignored a harder truth. Modern reconnaissance did not obey the limits of branches and leaves. Ukraine had invested heavily in watchful eyes above, piloted drones, satellites, and on-the-ground informants who understood precisely which clearings hid valuable targets. Hidden to the unaided eye, the Coxswains were not hidden to thermal imaging. Their size made them unavoidable once located. That size was their curse as much as their value. Heavy barrels and immovable chassis made them slow to relocate. They were not the kind of weapons that could shift positions quickly after a strike. Command knew this, but still gambled that intimidation would earn more than mobility. They believed these guns would frighten Ukrainian operators, a giant shadow hiding behind the forest. What they did not consider was that being both rare and oversized practically shouted priority target. The Coxswains had become double-edged machines. They carried prestige as emblems of an alliance, but that same prestige drew enemy attention. Their value invited destruction. They were never going to remain invisible. At exactly 5:13 a.m., this illusion collapsed when 3 rockets cut across the sky over Kursk. How can 91 seconds erase $50 million worth of artillery firepower, along with the 60 men trained to wield it? That question began at dawn, when Ukrainian drones hovered silently over a clearing west of Kursk. The drones had stalked the site for days, gathering patterns of movement, recording the times when crews rotated shifts, logged how ammunition was loaded into vehicles, and tracked when the camp seemed most still. On that morning, at first light, cameras relayed every motion back to Kyiv, where operators scanned the screen, waiting for a signal that their window had opened. The launch order moved quickly. 3 HIMARS rockets cut into the pre-dawn air, each traveling almost 3 times the speed of sound. The crews in Kyiv did not speak as they watched the blurred streaks arc toward the coordinates. For those seconds, the forest looked still, the clearing quiet, campfires just beginning to burn down. Then, the missiles struck. Impact shattered the illusion of cover. Pine trunks swayed like reeds in wind, some shattering outright as compressed air and jagged steel tore across the clearing. A curtain of fire bloomed over the site, not a single blast, but 3 overlapping detonations that lifted dirt, metal, and men together. Radios crackled with unanswered hails, static filling channels once occupied by routine check-ins. The waiting drones recorded every second as flames rolled outward, feeding on ammunition and fuel. The Coxsone guns, machines that stretched longer than trucks, crumpled instantly. One artillery piece lost its barrel completely, the steel tube hurled 30 meters away and half buried in soil. Another twisted so violently under pressure that its entire chassis bent out of line, wheels lifted from the ground at odd angles like discarded debris. Fragments of armored plates wedged violently into nearby trees, some lodged 40 feet high, proof of how raw force had scattered their remains. Ammunition trucks absorbed the rest. Their cargo detonated in waves more violent than the opening strike. Secondary bursts ignited hotter and louder, echoing through the forest as fire tore gasoline drums open. Every detonation amplified until even the drones trembled in the shockwave. Heat signatures shown on the monitors painted the clearing bright white, no distinction left between equipment, men, or landscape. The crews operating these weapons never stood a chance. Roughly 60 North Korean soldiers had manned the site only moments before. Trained to keep the guns firing under pressure, they were undone in less than 2 minutes. By the time the cameras completed their rotation over the smoking pit, there were no figures left to identify, no movement detected. The report back to Kyiv confirmed full casualties and no recoverable systems. For Ukraine, confirmation mattered as much as destruction. The drones provided undeniable sight of the strike from start to finish. Frames captured the rocket's impact, the secondary fires, and the collapse of every heavy weapon in that position. Despite Russian broadcast censorship, the footage offered concrete evidence that these prized foreign reinforcements were erased in under 2 minutes. Economics sharpened the impact. Each HIMARS rocket cost just under $50,000. Together, the 3 carried a price tag near $150,000. What they wiped out carried a valuation more than 300 times greater. $50 million worth of equipment dismantled before firing a shot in battle. The balance sheet of the war flashed in sharp relief. Moscow and Pyongyang's promise of untouchable strength had been shredded by weapons that Ukraine treated as routine tools of modern combat. The strike near Kursk was more than a direct hit on foreign artillery. It stripped away illusions of safety, showing that even distant reinforcements could be erased in less than 2 minutes. A single burst of precision reshaped confidence between Moscow and Pyongyang, raising doubts about the value of weapons that cannot survive long enough to fight. So consider this. How many more hidden assets across the battlefield are just 91 seconds from destruction? If you found this breakdown useful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. In today's wars, survival isn't measured in years or even days, it's measured in seconds.